Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 480. All right, guys, welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise awareness of trauma and to support new trauma therapists just starting out on their trauma-informed journey. I do that through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. If you're a therapist of any kind, interested in learning about trauma, and you're looking for support and inspiration, I invite you to check out Trauma Therapist 2.0 by going to traumatherapist2.com. That's Trauma Therapist, the number 2.com. All right, let's get started. This episode is sponsored by Somatic Experiencing. Trauma may be a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Somatic Experiencing is a psychobiological method of addressing clients' physical and emotional trauma conditions and helps to give voice to their experiences without a need for them to retell their story. SE focuses on regulation of the nervous system and offers the opportunity to engage, complete, and resolve the body's instinctual responses to traumatic experiences. For more information regarding somatic experiencing and the SE professional training program, the Trauma Therapist Podcast listeners can visit traumahealing.org/TTP. That's traumahealing.org/TTP. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Rachel Moore. Rachel, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So Rachel is an EMDR therapist in private practice based in San Diego, California, who works primarily with creative clients, writers, artists, and musicians. A former journalist, Rachel recently has had an article published in the San Diego Union-Tribune about grief and loss related to the coronavirus pandemic. Rachel has presented at the San Diego State University Writers Conference and has been leading groups based on the book, The Artist's Way, for more than a decade to help clients overcome creative blocks.
Indeed.
Awesome. I read that book when it came out. Loved it.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
All right, so let's dive in here. So are you from San Diego?
No, I grew up near Boise, Idaho.
Okay.
Yeah.
How long have you been in San Diego?
Well, I've been in Southern California for 20 years now.
Okay.
Just this summer will be 20 years. Yeah.
Okay. Nice. So how are you dealing with, obviously we're recording this in the time of the pandemic, coronavirus, et cetera. How have you been managing and dealing?
It's been really interesting. I just actually posted something on my blog today about my decision to give up my physical office, which was, I know a lot of us therapists.
Permanently?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I had somebody take over the lease, and it was one of those situations where I had been thinking about it. What am I going to do about this? I personally don't feel safe returning until there's a vaccine or, a lot of testing and tracing or something like that, right? Where I feel confident enough to return. And someone else was looking for a space to do teletherapy from because they had roommates and a cat that just wasn't really working out for them at their house. And for some reason, when she posted that she was looking for a full-time space, it was just boom. Oh, this is what I'm going to do. And this is how it's going to happen. Wow. And I had to catch up with the reality of I'm going to give up my space because part of it too is that things have been going really well online, even with EMDR, much to my surprise, which is great. But yeah, it was a bit of a process with some tears and,
Interesting. I haven't really, heard people talk about that. I mean, but the fact that they're giving up their offices and which is kind of crazy. I mean, you talked about a vaccine. I was talking with someone yesterday and they were like, well, we still don't have a vaccine for HIV.
Right. I mean, which is a different type of virus, but yeah, no, that's a really good point. It's like that of any of the viruses, right? You would think like, okay, we got to put all our resources toward that.
Right.
Yeah. And there's never been one, as far as I know, for a coronavirus.
Yeah, I don't know. But
I don't know
whatever.
either.
Yeah, it's just interesting to think about all the different ramifications of this.
Yes.
So let's kind of dive in here.
Sure.
What really intrigues me and the reason why I love doing this podcast is getting to talk to people like you who are working to help people specifically in the realm of trauma. So walk us through your journey. How the heck did you get into this field?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I was actually a journalist. I was a newspaper copy editor for 14 years. my undergraduate degree was in creative writing. I went to a small liberal arts school. And actually, my first experience with therapy was right after I graduated from undergrad. And my therapist, I wrote to him later and told him I am a therapist now, because he literally said, "How did you not get into this field?" Which was sweet. But I was like, I'm like 22. I'm like, who am I going to help at that time? I mean, for me right now. So had my career as a journalist. And then there were a few reasons why I wanted to shift. One of them being, the world of journalism has changed completely. And what I started out in was not the same thing that I was in. Now, another thing was that I always worked swing shift. So I always worked like 3 p.m. to midnight, that type of thing, which was fine for me. Well, then I got married, and my husband, bless him, he was like, "Yeah, I think it'll be okay." And then after about a year, he's like, "Yeah, it's not okay." Because it was almost like being in a long distance relationship, So,
Right.
so that was sort of the history of it. But I've always been interested in psychology. And I mean, I think to me, being somebody who's interested in literature and writing and psychology, I mean, to me, those are the same things. I don't see any different. Sometimes people will tell me like, "Oh, wow, that's such a difference." I'm like, no, I love people's stories, and I love helping them, using their stories and their experience.
So how did things unfold? You went to school or
Right.
went back
So I
to
went to
school or what?
school. Yeah, I went to school in, I guess I started in 2010. And I graduated, and then it took me a year to actually commit to doing the 3,000 hours that we need in California of training in order to sit for the license. That was a big decision. And then I was trying to figure out, like, well, who am I going to, right? Who am I going to help? What am I possibly going to do? And then I finally realized, like, oh, wait a minute. I can help people like me, right? Who are creative people just trying to figure out their way in the world, who don't
Mm-hmm.
often get represented or supported in ways, I think, in our culture that are really helpful. So that's why I decided on that. And then I was actually a hospice counselor as part of my internships, and I was able to get training through HAP, the Humanitarian Assistance Program, I think is what it stands for
Mm-hmm.
EMDR. So I was able
Okay.
to get discounted training for that, which was a wonderful opportunity because I was working for this nonprofit hospice, and then just went from there.
Mm-hmm.
Got licensed in 2017, and have been for the past year been pretty full helping
Wow.
people.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what is it about creative types, quote unquote? Um, Obviously you said you are one, and
Yes.
that was kind of your lead in there, but you also said they don't get represented in terms of
Yeah.
being supported. Talk more about that.
Well, I think there are a lot of things. I think a lot of things that creative people hear, and certainly I have heard, are, phrases like, "Oh, you must have a lot of time on your hands if you're able to, be musical or paint a picture, or write a story or something like that." It's like these pejoratives, like, "Oh, that's a waste of time. You should be doing something productive. You should be making money from your,"
Right.
like, I made a decision a long time ago. I would never be paid to sing because it was too tender for me. It was too sacred. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, and yet, some people who are close to me are like, "Man, if I had your voice, I'd be out there, making money." And blah, blah. I think it's a very American or Western, whatever, idea that we have to capitalize and monetize
Well, also too,
any,
it
yeah,
somehow legitimizes us, right? If you're making
yeah.
able to make money, there's also that question: have you sold anything? You know, that
Right.
dreaded
Yeah.
question.
Where
I
are you
think,
published? Yeah.
right?
What do you write? Where are you published? Well, I'm like, I don't know. Does it matter? I don't know. It doesn't matter to me, but it seems to matter to this person who's asking me. And what does that mean? And, and then if we're talking more specifically about therapy, I remember one time I was telling my therapist at the time about my friend's electric piano and how when you sat down and you pushed the keys, it felt just like playing a piano. Even as I talk about it now, I'm getting chills, right? And I was trying to explain this to her, and she's kind of like, "Oh, is that like good?" Or, and it's not her fault. I mean, there's
Right,
nothing wrong
right.
with her. However, I would like to be the type of person that I would want to go to that would understand the importance of creativity, understand sometimes it's a life or death thing, and the importance of art. Like, I
Right.
was supposed to be at the symphony right now. And I really, had a lot of grief around that. during the pandemic, and so like the real deep spiritual, whatever you want to label it as an individual, importance of creativity. I felt like in a therapeutic setting, that would be really important to recognize and just to have an understanding.
I'm wondering if I don't usually do this on the podcast, but I wonder if we can get more specific and you can maybe talk about a particular client or kind of a mashup of clients, because I want to know what this looks like.
Sure.
I myself wrote fiction for a long time and had that issue where my father just did not get it. And it was a waste of time. And it really did impact myself and self-esteem and the trajectory of a lot of what I did. But for those people, this is kind of an interesting topic that I really haven't talked too much about on here. And I'm sure a lot of people might be listening and what do you mean creative types and they're not getting support? So what does it look like when you're working with someone, or granted it's going to look differently for a lot of people, but give us an example.
Well, for example, like, I might work with a singer, like I've worked with a couple of opera singers and I've sung opera myself. And so it's hard to explain, exactly what that connection would be, but I literally understand even for such, things such as just technical terms. Like we don't have to waste time. They're like, oh, I did this and that. I'm like, yeah, I get it. Okay, great. Go ahead. Right. And then I sort of like how, like, for example, I might work with somebody who's a dancer. I'm not as familiar with the dance world. And yet she is able to explain it to me in a way that I'm, like open to. And I learn the terms, and I try to speak to her in her language. So it's just like, anybody else would do with like a cultural difference. So I know those aren't like super specific, and I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, just things like that just, it's funny. There's a part of me that just really loves efficiency. And I love just being able to just save time, right? Like you don't have to explain it to me. Just, I've been there, I've done that. Yeah, let's go and let's, do the EMDR, or let's do whatever we need to do, I also think it helps make it safe for my clients. Again, to know that I'm not going to judge them. I'm not going to say like, why are you wasting your time on this? We would never say that to a client, but
sure.
But in particular, I'm going to have empathy and understanding, and be able to support them again in this idea about how important it is to them. And it's not just a hobby or a side project or whatever. It's important to their being.
Yeah. That really speaks to me as well, because I think, you said oftentimes it can be a life or death thing. And that might sound like an exaggeration, but it's so true. I mean, it really defines how people move through the world. For yourself, doing this work, how do you approach it? I mean, what kind of modalities have you kind of been drawn to that allow you to do this work?
Well, I think EMDR primarily. It's interesting how when I was doing my training for EMDR about halfway through or something, I went to a consultant, and I had thought of it before this as like a tool. It's like any other tool, blah, blah, blah. She explained, no, this is a theory. And I thought, I am not one to like really, sign on to like really specific, this is the way we're going to do it. And this is the only way. Like, that's just like not me at all. However, I realized I kind of joke about this when I talk to people about it. Like I consciously drank the Kool-Aid when it came to EMDR. I was like, if I'm going to use this, I'm going to have to be all in, right? And so I do. I see, everything from the AIP, the adaptive perspective, when it comes to trauma. Even if we're not doing, reprocessing the eye movements, I will think about it that way. It's like, okay, what's happening in the memory network and things like that. So, it's kind of a boring answer, but EMDR is really where I come from, and what I do. And I find it can be really helpful with, things like creative blocks, things like trauma around creativity and people's experience with it. Yeah.
And talk a little bit about the specifics of EMDR. I mean, we've talked about it on this podcast, but for those listeners who aren't too familiar with it, is it just for trauma? Can people work with EMDR for other things too?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, of course, EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, which is always a huge mouthful. And I wish there was another name for it. But I I love this question because, I'll explain it to people and when they call to consult with me or whatever, and I'll say, like if there's a little T trauma or a big T trauma, and what that means is like, a small thing that happens that's upsetting, a big thing that happens that's traumatic, it can get stuck in the brain. And so that when it's triggered, you can have the same sights, thoughts, smells, feeling as if it's happening right now. And I talk about REM sleep. There's a couple of different theories as to why EMDR works. We know it does work, but we don't know how or why, which I think is true for a lot of our modalities. And one of the theories is that when we're in, excuse me, is that when we're sleeping and our eye movements are going, eyes are going back and forth in REM, that's the brain sort of processing our memories. I don't know if this is accurate, but I always say yeah, I had a sandwich yesterday for lunch. Okay, do I need to remember that? Is that important? Nah, just throw it into long-term storage. It's fine. But trauma can interrupt that process. And so it gets stuck. And through EMDR, we use eye movements or other what we call like bilateral stimulation. So sounds, the clients can, in this format, clients can tap on their legs or their shoulders or whatever. We use that we stimulate the information and use that to reprocess it so that we can keep the stuff that's useful, because there are useful things to be learned from traumatic experiences, and digest or get rid of the stuff that's not useful so it's not as distressing to us in our day-to-day lives anymore. So that's the sort of the quick and dirty explanation I use.
Yeah. All right, folks. I want to thank my sponsor for today, BetterHelp. They're at BetterHelp.com, online therapy platform. So I have a question for you. Is there anything that you feel that's interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals right now? And you're probably saying, well, yeah, of course, Guy, we're living in this crazy, unprecedented time. And for me, it's the same. Yeah, of course, that's it. But there's also a lot of you know that I've struggled with anxiety throughout my life. It's come and gone. It's waxed and waned. And I chose to see a therapist to help me work through that. And I'm not completely free of it, but I want to invite you to check out BetterHelp.com. They're an online therapy platform that will help you assess your needs and then match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can go online, log into your account once you sign up, and send your therapist messages. You'll get back timely, thoughtful responses, and then you can set up weekly sessions either via phone or video. And one of the great things about this is that a lot of us don't want to get into therapy because we feel, let's face it, we're not going to have a good match, or they're not going to listen to us, or it's just not going to be a good fit. BetterHelp is committed to finding you, to matching you with someone who's going to be a great fit. So they make it really easy to change therapists if you need to, and there's no fee for that. They have a lot of testimonials up on their website. It's kind of crazy because there's just so many of them, and I just want to share one here. I think it's pretty cool. One person wrote in about their therapist. They said, I highly recommend Sharon as a therapist. She listens with no judgment and offers immediate support and suggestions. I feel safe with her helping me because I know that she is solution-oriented. She's clear, serious, and she's also kind. Not bad. Testimonial there. So look, as a Trauma Therapist podcast listener, BetterHelp is offering you 10% off your first month when you go to BetterHelp.com/TTP. That stands for Trauma Therapist Podcast. So it's BetterHelp, HELP.com/TTP to sign up. You can join the other over 1 million people doing the same thing, taking charge of their mental health and making it happen. All right. See you there. Bye. I'm wondering about with regards to, creative types, creative people.
Yeah.
I mean, that feels a little clunky to say that, but
It's okay.
Do creative people respond better to EMDR? How?
I don't think it really has much to do with that. Well, gosh, I don't know. I wonder. Okay, I do wonder. I haven't done any studies. I probably should. But I wonder if having a brain that makes connections like we do when we're being creative, right? Like when we're writing, especially, I think having a brain that makes connections and associations, I think can be really helpful. And my own experience of EMDR as a client is that it feels very much like the creative process. It feels, for me
Mm-hmm.
too, it feels a lot like dreaming, but it's like, okay, we go over here and then we go over here. Oh yeah, it all connects
Mm-hmm.
here, we kind of like, so it makes me very curious. And actually that's a really great question.
Yeah, yeah. In terms of like clinical errors you've made, a lot of
Hmm.
the this is one of the questions I ask because a lot of people get a lot of grist for the mill out of this question.
Yeah,
Share one of your clinical errors you've made and how that impacted you, what you learned from it.
sure. So probably my worst clinical error was my very first client, like very first when I was still a student. She left. She ended early.
Oh boy.
She was like, "Yeah, I'm not doing this." And I had an interesting response. It's interesting to think about it later too, and I'll talk about that. But I had an interesting response. Was I was very angry. I was, this was not how it was supposed to go. And then it got even more awkward because, I mean, I wasn't angry at her, but it was like internally. And then it got awkward because I was working at the YMCA, and then we took cash or whatnot, and she gave me cash and she needed change, and I didn't have change, and I had to go bother some other people for change. So I had to like acknowledge and admit to them that like my my session was ending early, and this person needs change, and it was so awkward and it was so tough. So thinking about it now, I I really think that what happened for me in that situation, and frankly that whole traineeship, was that the modality they were using did not line up with me and my values and
Mm-hmm.
my way of seeing the world. It's not a bad modality. In fact, I use it, every now and then for things, which is Bow and family systems, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine. But like I said, I don't really like to sign on to things whole hog necessarily. And I remember telling a trainee friend at this same traineeship, she was like, I don't know, I don't know about this Bowen thing, and I don't know how to think of it or what to do. And I was like, okay, I'm so sorry for any Bowen people out there. It's not about Bowen. It's about where I was at. I was like, you need to realize that this is a cult that we're in. Okay. And just think of it like a cult. If you deviate, at all from the cult, you're going to get punished. Like you're going to get knocked
Mm-hmm.
down because you got to sign on. You got to be in the cult. Right. So just act like that and we'll get through this and it'll be okay. But I remember from that first session, I don't even remember like what I said, but I was so trying to apply this model
Mm-hmm.
into just relating with a person. And I didn't know yet, I hadn't read Irvin Yalom saying like the relationship is the most important part, nor was that supported, like from
Mm-hmm.
my supervisor at the time. Not at all. It was the model, the model, the model, right?
Right.
And even now, even though I say like, I've drunk the Kool-Aid on EMDR, I know and I still understand that the relationship is the healing part of
Mm-hmm.
the therapy, and I truly believe that. I like how he says, the techniques are just and the theories are just like we got to do something, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
right. Like
But
I do think EMDR probably does something from what I've seen, but ultimately we just need to have something to do.
yeah, yeah. Um, I appreciate that response. I mean, I think it's really important what you said that that particular modality just it didn't feel right. It didn't fit right.
Mhm.
And that yesterday we had a one of our member calls in my membership community, Trauma Therapist
Mhm.
2.0, and there was a question about that touched upon how do you know which modalities to go to
Mhm.
study to pursue, and people were talking about that point. Some things don't fit. Talk about that.
Mhm.
How does one go about finding that thing that fits? How did you know
Uh,
EMDR felt right for you?
Wow, I don't know why that makes me feel emotional for some reason. I feel like some tears coming up. That's interesting. My first thought when you asked how do you know is like you just throw things against the wall and see what sticks. I mean, that's kind of how the process felt for me, rightly or wrongly. I was with EMDR. I was an EMDR client before I before I studied it and was trained in it. So that helped, I'd already kind of bought into this as something that works. So that helped a bit. For a while early on, I really liked CBT. I like the idea of changing thoughts and how that affects emotions and behaviors or whatnot. I don't know how one comes to it. I just know that when I found it, it felt right, and for me, it was like the combination of thoughts, feelings, and body, right?
Mm-hmm.
The past, the present, and the future. I mean, it just seemed to encompass like the whole person. Whereas I know it's kind of like, for me, like I know that intellectually, I mean, all of us in this business are smart. Like intellectually, I can understand things. It doesn't help the back part of my brain that's traumatized, right? It doesn't help the fight or flight, or freeze or fawn reaction. And I didn't know until EMDR, I didn't really know how to approach that part, the traumatized part. I think CBT can be great for maybe not traumatic things. Maybe it is, I don't know, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, that seemed to make a difference addressing the trauma.
And this idea that it's important for modality to feel right in your hands, in a sense, is what crucial. It's vital to doing this work.
I think, to be honest with you, I think it's vital to being successful at this work.
Yeah.
There was even a study I remember from school where they said, what are the factors that lead to good client outcomes, right? And I'm sure there's been lots of studies like this, but I remember this study in particular. And of course, the biggest factor was the client, excuse me, was the client buy-in. Like, right, they're willing to be there. They want to do the work. The second factor was the therapist's belief in their modality. That was the second biggest factor that would predict good client outcomes. And I think that's really important, right? And just for me personally, like I really, really need to, again, not in a cult-like way, but stand by what I'm doing, right? Have conviction and be open to other things. Like I'm totally open to, maybe something else besides EMDR, the next great thing evolves and comes, great, I'll get trained on it. I'll learn it, right? I'll change and adapt and do whatever needs to happen. And in the meantime, would I be my own client? Yeah, I would. I think that's important. I don't want to be, a therapist that I wouldn't want to see, to kind of take Groucho Marx's comment a little bit different there. But yeah, I think it's extremely important. And again, like I said, extremely important for good client outcome.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of, the creativity, and I want to kind of put it back on you.
Okay.
How do you use creativity as a therapist?
It's a great question. It was interesting writing my little blog piece about giving up my office. What I wrote in there was like, I think this is the biggest creative project I've ever done, was just creating my office, designing it, having the space, all that. So that definitely came into play. Also, I think the importance, again, of having an open mind and coming in just like as a blank slate, or the blank page, right? Just also having a beginner's mind. That we talk about that a lot in art and creativity, right? And mindfulness too, of course. But I think that I don't know if this exactly answers your question, but it kind of does. I think that being a therapist and being an artist are one of the most humbling things that you could do, because you never know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen when I, start writing something or open my mouth to sing. Like, I think I know what's going to happen, but you never know, right? I never know when somebody comes into the office or I see them online, what they're going to come with, right? So I have to be adaptive and think on my feet and, and use all those skills that I bring to art and writing and singing and music. And to me, it's all the same. It's all the same stuff. So to be creative in therapy, I think, is just to do therapy.
And to get to that point where you're able to not only say that, but to live that and embody that. Was that a process for you?
Well, yeah, because I think about that very first client, right? That was definitely not
Mm-hmm.
it. Yeah, and for my time there was not it. I think it was a process of becoming confident as a clinician, becoming more confident. It's funny, like it's really weird. I mean, our job is like so weird anyway. It's like, and one of the weird parts of it is that you don't really know how you compare to other people. And so you don't really know where you are. I mean, it's not super important, but it's a factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of when I was working at the newspaper, at one of my newspaper jobs, and I was kind of, getting up in the ranks or whatever. And so one of my jobs was to write headlines. And then the job above that was to like approve the headlines that other people wrote and fix them and then send them off to be printed, right? So I was sort of promoted to that job of approving other people's headlines. And I realized, I was like, oh, I didn't know I was that good. So I saw everybody else, right, in their sort of raw form. I mean, I obviously make mistakes a lot too, but like, you never know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, definitely the process of becoming more confident and realizing, like, okay, no, I think I'm doing okay here.
Mm-hmm.
That helped me feel open up, and have more freedom around like, okay, I don't have to have a set agenda. I can just
Right.
respond to what's happening right now. Yeah.
Right. Right. Let me just remind everyone that I'm speaking with Rachel Moore. Rachel, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Oh, sure. Best way is probably just to go to my website. There's a contact page on there,
Okay.
rachelmoorecounseling.com.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
RachelMooreCounseling.com. I'll have that linked up at the show notes page here at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. All right. Let's get a go-to book recommendation from you, whether trauma related or not, or
Sure.
creatively related or not. What would you say?
You probably won't be surprised with this answer. I would definitely recommend The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron.
Okay.
It's funny. It's a little outdated in certain ways. There's so many anachronisms. It's kind of cute, but because it's like more than 25 years old, I think. However, the way that it's one of those books that probably for a lot of people is like the Bible or another like religious text. Like I come back to that book and I change. And so I find new things in that book. The book doesn't change, but I change and I read different chapters. I read different parts and I'm like, wow, I never thought about it that way. Or I don't remember this being in here.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those magical books that I appreciate so much for that.
Just if you could, for those people who aren't familiar with the book, just give us a little brief descriptor of what it is.
Sure. I think she calls it like a spiritual path toward creativity or something like discovering and uncovering your creativity. Is there some sort of thing like that? It's a way for people to really come back to perhaps that feeling that they had as a kid when they were making art and doing things. And then things happen, trauma happens, frankly, along the way to shut that down. And this is a way of reclaiming that for yourself. And it's in 12 chapters. I have a feeling, I don't know if she's ever talked about it, but I have a feeling they're sort of analogous to the 12 steps. I get that sense. But it's really interesting how the chapters sort of layer onto each other too. But there are 12 chapters, just really brief, but deep and dense, but accessible essays, and then some tasks to do at the end. I've met a few people who have read the book and done the tasks on their own, although for most people it helps to find a group to do that with. I've thought about running a group online, but I've been adjusting to everything so far. It hasn't quite come to fruition yet, but groups can be really helpful to get accountability and also just to get input from other people, I think is really helpful.
Awesome. The Artist's Way by Judith Cameron. For me, I know when I
Julia,
went through that book, was it Julian?
Julia
Cameron.
Julia Cameron, yeah.
Julia Cameron, thank you.
Sure.
When I first found that book and did it, I found it just very kind of affirming.
Yeah.
Like, okay, I'm a creative type. Yes, it's okay to be doing this and to feel this way. That's what I got out of it, and I really appreciated that. But
sure.
Anyway, delight having you on here, talking to you. What's next for you? What are you doing?
Wow, I don't know.
With your life?
What's
like
next for any of us?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Well, I don't know. This just comes to mind. it's so strange now, kind of not being able to go anywhere and yet knowing I need time off. And so I did this thing in my practice that I've wanted to do for a long time, which is to really schedule out every 2 months, I'm going to take a week off.
Mm.
And that's to catch up on stuff with my business, to, just relax. I don't know why that comes up. It's not really, a huge thing, I guess. And yet it's very important for me, to actually do that thing I've been wanting to do. So maybe during those times, I'll come up with some ideas of stuff. I mean, I'm like, I feel like so busy right now, which is great. Yet, and I know that there's something else out there for me to do, and I haven't quite figured out what it is yet. So maybe that's what I'm doing next. What I'm doing next is figuring out what that is. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Having given up your office and
Yeah.
doing work in this realm.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thank you so much.
Appreciate you coming on here. All right,
Thanks.
Rachel,
It was
take
wonderful.
care.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye. All right. Thank you so much for checking out the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you're a new trauma therapist, if you're a student, if you're passionate about learning about trauma, if you're just starting out on your trauma-informed journey, I want to invite you to check out my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. It's specifically dedicated to therapists of all kinds who are just starting out, who want to be around other people who are doing this work, who are passionate about learning and learning from seasoned professionals. Check out Trauma Therapist 2.0. That's Trauma Therapist 2.com. Trauma Therapist 2.com. All right. Have a great day.